"One of you will betray me." The men around the table stopped eating. They had crossed the country together, slept beneath the same roofs, and watched crowds open before the man now sitting among them. One of them had already arranged to bring armed men to him. The others searched the faces around the table. "Is it I?" Outside, Jerusalem waited in darkness. How had Jesus reached this room? Inside a city guarded by Rome, surrounded by friends he could no longer trust. The road had begun more than 30 years earlier, beneath another ruler who feared losing control. Matthew tells us that visitors from the east arrived in Jerusalem asking for a child born to be king of the Jews. But Judea already had a king. Herod had fought for his throne and secured it with Roman support. He built fortresses, palaces, and the magnificent temple complex in Jerusalem. He also executed members of his own family when he suspected them of threatening him. A child carrying a royal title was not a miracle to Herod. He was a rival. Matthew remembers the family escaping into Egypt. Luke preserves a different route, taking them from Bethlehem through Jerusalem and back to Nazareth. The routes differ, but both stories lead away from Herod's palace and toward the Galilean village where Jesus would grow up. Nazareth had no political importance. After Herod died, Rome divided his kingdom. His son Antipas received Galilee, while Judea eventually came under direct Roman administration. Jesus grew up beneath Antipas, far from the prefects governing Jerusalem. His neighbors carried water, ground grain, and worked land vulnerable to harvest, debt, and taxation. Jesus became known as a tekton, a craftsman or builder whose work may have involved wood and stone. The Gospels show him once during those hidden years. At 12, he traveled to Jerusalem for Passover. On the return journey, Mary and Joseph discovered that he was missing. After 3 days, they found him inside the temple, questioning its teachers. He returned to Nazareth, then almost 2 decades disappear. When Jesus steps into view again, he is standing in a river before a man whose voice has reached a king. John was calling people into the wilderness. He told them judgment was approaching. Farmers, laborers, and families left their villages to hear him. They entered the Jordan and rose from the water, believing they had prepared themselves for what was coming. Jesus joined them. John baptized him. Soon afterward, Jesus began preaching in Galilee. His message was that the kingdom of God was near. But Galilee already had a kingdom, and Antipas already sat above it. John discovered how little space existed between a religious message and political danger. He condemned Antipas's marriage to Herodias. Antipas imprisoned him. The Gospels describe a banquet, a dance, and a promise the ruler refused to break before his guests. Before the meal ended, John's severed head was carried into the room. Josephus tells the death differently. He says Antipas feared John's influence might lead the crowds toward rebellion. Either way, a ruler decided that a preacher capable of moving people was too dangerous to live. Jesus did not withdraw. He moved toward the Sea of Galilee and began gathering people of his own. He called fishermen, Simon and Andrew, James and John. Their boats belonged to an economy controlled by Antipas. Catching, processing, and transporting fish could all involve taxes and tolls. Then Jesus called a tax collector. Men who surrendered part of their earnings to the system now traveled beside a man who worked for it. The sick began arriving next. Families pressed toward Jesus, carrying those who could no longer walk. People marked by illness or damaged reputations entered homes already crowded around him. The Gospels describe healings and exorcisms. Those convinced by what they saw carried the news ahead, and Jesus could enter the next village to find people waiting. He spoke through lives they recognized. A farmer scattered seed across poor ground. A laborer waited to be hired. A debtor stood before someone who could take everything. A traveler was beaten and abandoned beside a road. Jesus placed the kingdom of God inside fields, wages, debts, and mercy. He ate with people others avoided. Women traveled with the movement and helped sustain it. Luke names Mary Magdalene, Susanna, and Joanna, a woman connected to the household of Antipas. His disputes with other Jewish teachers also became sharper. They argued over Sabbath, purity, forgiveness, wealth, and authority. They shared the same God and scriptures, which made the questions more urgent. Who could forgive sins? What did God demand from the wealthy? And who had given Jesus the authority to answer? Some followers began to believe he was the Messiah through whom God would restore Israel. They did not all imagine the same restoration. Some expected divine intervention. Others hoped foreign domination would end and a kingdom like David's would return. Rome had crushed such hopes before. Jesus could have remained in Galilee. Jerusalem lay under a different authority. Antipas governed the villages and the lake, but Pontius Pilate ruled Judea for Rome. Jerusalem was where Roman power, priestly authority, and enormous festival crowds met. It was dangerous, but it was also the center of the world to which Jesus' message belonged. If the kingdom of God concerned Israel, it could not remain only among the safer villages of Galilee. It had to be proclaimed in Jerusalem, beside the temple, at the center of Jewish worship and national hope. According to the Gospels, Jesus warned his disciples that suffering and death waited there. They struggled to understand him. Then he chose the road south. Passover was approaching. Pilgrims traveled toward Jerusalem to celebrate Israel's liberation from an oppressive ruler. Roman soldiers entered the city to ensure no one tried to repeat that story. Pilate came from Caesarea to oversee the festival. Jerusalem filled. Then Jesus appeared on a young donkey. His followers placed garments and branches before him and shouted words associated with kingship. The disciples saw a promise entering Jerusalem. Those responsible for controlling the city saw a man surrounded by a crowd. Jesus went to the temple. It was the sacred center of Jewish life and a place where worship, money, and authority met. Pilgrims exchanged currency and bought animals required for sacrifice. Jesus overturned the tables. Coins scattered across the ground. Trading stopped around him. People reached for what they could recover. He had not challenged authority in a remote village. He had disrupted activity inside Jerusalem's most sensitive institution during its most volatile week. The road out of the conflict was closing. Questions followed him. By what authority had he acted? Should Jews pay taxes to Caesar? Reject the tax and he could be accused before Rome. Approve it without qualification and he could lose people who saw it as the mark of foreign control. Jesus asked for the coin. Caesar's image looked back from it. "Give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar," he answered, "and to God what belongs to God." The trap failed. The danger remained. Jesus continued teaching where the crowds could reach him. Members of the priestly leadership wanted to arrest him, but an open seizure risked unrest. Rome still possessed the force and the power to execute. But first, Jesus had to be taken away from the people protecting him. The way to reach him came from inside his own circle. Judas agreed to lead them to Jesus after dark. On the final evening before his arrest, Jesus entered a furnished room with the men who had followed him from Galilee. They reclined around a low table. They had once left nets, trades, and homes because he asked them to follow. They had watched the sick reach for him, heard people call him Messiah, and entered Jerusalem expecting the kingdom of God. Some had argued about which of them would be greatest within it. One had already agreed to betray him. Jesus took bread, gave thanks, and broke it. He passed the pieces around the table. Then he shared a cup. Words later repeated inside churches across the world were first spoken in a room where no church existed. The disciples listened as Jesus spoke about his body and blood. Then he told them the danger was no longer only outside. "One of you will betray me." The men looked at those with whom they had crossed the country. One after another they asked, "Is it I?" No halo identified the loyal, no shadow marked the traitor. Jesus had walked into Jerusalem because his message could not remain far from the center of power. Now that power had found a road back to him, and it began with a man sitting at his table.